I'm sitting here at Techfestival with Lene Rachel Andersen. She is an economist, philosopher, and a member of the Club of Rome. And I'm here to talk to you about a session we went to. You participated in that session. It was called the Nordic Way, Global Technology Narrative. And the introduction to that was something about that at the West we have the US, and they're using data and technology to make profit. And on the East we have maybe most importantly China, who uses data and technology to control. And the idea was, could we have a discussion about how could we in the Nordic countries be like a Nordic hero? And you had some responses to the hero thing, and do the things in another way. During this conversation, there was one subject that came up, and this was about data, because now we are in a situation or in a time where we actually have enough data to actually do something with it. So could we have a small elaboration on that? Yeah. Because I know you have your opinions on that. And how would the Nordic future of that be? How could we lead the way?
Yeah, right now, the thing about the US and China is absolutely right. And I think that these new technologies basically give us the opportunity for anything we want. And so the problem is, what is it we want? And we haven't. In China, has decided what the technologies are being used for and what people are allowed to use them for. And in the US, it's the market and private enterprise. And the market cannot regulate this and cannot protect our human rights and our privacy. And the Chinese government is definitely not interested in privacy and human rights. So what can we do in Europe and what can we do in the Nordic countries? And I think that Europe really needs to get our act together, and we need to create a deliberate vision for what the future should be like on the planet, not just in Europe. But we should develop a vision that has human rights and human dignity and freedom at its core. And those values, if they're at the core of the technologies that we develop, then we can actually create a flourishing planet, a fantastic future, freedom and prosperity. People have promised freedom and prosperity for all before, but now we actually have the technologies to do it. So there are a lot of opportunities here, and we're not using them. And then there are the Nordic countries, and unfortunately, there are a lot of good things about the Nordic countries. There are actually a lot of fantastic things about the Nordic countries. But one thing that I find highly problematic, and that is also what we were talking about in the session you were referring to, is that the high levels of trust that we have in the Nordic countries have caused us, particularly in Denmark, to design technologies and systems, especially systems in the municipalities and governmental systems, where our data is not handled properly, and where we're just handing over our data because the Danes trust their government. And that worked when all the data was stored in wooden cabinets with little files in them, because you couldn't just spread everything around the globe. But today, all that data can go basically anywhere. It can be hacked, and it can be improperly stored. It can be shared. There's in the health system, once you have all the data on all the Danes in the same data system, centrally stored, not even in Denmark. The software is American. The servers are probably in a third place. Not just is that a problem when it comes to who actually stores the data and owns the servers and the technology behind it, but once you have all that data in one system, if it's not designed properly, if it's not designed with privacy at heart and with different login mechanisms for who has access to this data and who's allowed to have access to this data, you can have nurses and doctors who go searching for celebrities and their health files, which is, unethical, it's illegal, it's immoral, it's highly problematic, it's all kinds of stuff. But the system has not been designed to protect people against that kind of abuse. So by not having an informed conversation about how do we want to use these technologies, what should we use them for, and who owns our data as citizens, we haven't had that debate. We cannot design proper systems. And the way that we have trust and confidence in our public institutions in Denmark and our government is just, we could do that 30 years ago, but we cannot do that anymore. And we're going to design some horrible systems and create a horrible future for ourselves if we don't realize that very soon and change it. And what we must do, and that's not just here, that should be across Europe, and it really should be around the globe, is that every single individual on this globe should own their own data. And the systems should be designed so that people own their own data and they only hand it out either voluntarily, because they feel like it, because they can see a purpose with it, or if they sign up for certain services, for instance, be it insurance or public welfare, or the library needs to know how many books you have borrowed and things like that. And then, of course, in case that some kind of legal issue arises, or you're under suspicion for a crime or something, there should be some way that the legal system can get access to your data. But that should go through the courts, and not just because some office clerk somewhere has to log into all the data in all the health systems. So we need to think this as a connected whole. We have to have a systems perspective on our data, on our future, on our privacy, on our human rights, and how we're designing these systems.
So what I would like your input to is how do we do as consultants, as advisors, and as people who are helping our clients build these systems, how do we find this direction and start to go in another direction? Right. Do we have to wait for the government to make decisions about who owns the data, or can we start building solutions?
You always have the right and the possibility to build solutions that live up to these demands. But what you can also do is that you can organize with the other companies in the same industry, and with NGOs and public authorities, and say we need to have some sort of classification or quality control system, like you have the ISO system for quality control in industry production and other kinds of production. There should be standards in this industry, and there could be different standards of privacy by design, security by design, all kinds of things by design. And then you could get a certificate as a company whether you live up to this or not. There has to be some sort of monitoring institution. There has to be a legal system that can handle this, and the judges in this legal system have to have the technical understanding. And part of what we're facing right now is that we have the institutions for the industrialized democratic nation state, where we have physical goods that are produced mechanically, and if you are going to export anything from one country to the next, you have to put it on a truck, drive it across the border, and then you have exported something. You import things the same way. Today, with digital services, even if you program things in Denmark, you're probably using servers in a third country, a second country, and the financial transactions and the way that people pay for it go through servers in a third country, and everything is just going around the globe. So we need institutions for this, because we don't have these institutions. And some of the institutions of the future may actually be other algorithms through which you can send the software that you're claiming is doing something, certain things, and certain things it's not doing. Run that through another algorithm to check it whether it's doing what you're saying that your product is doing. I don't know how that should work, because I'm not a technician. I don't have the computer skills to understand this at the technical level, but at the legal level, the philosophical level, and the human and societal level, I have to care about this, because if I don't, as a philosopher and as a citizen and as a consumer, my data is just going to be it's going to be owned by somebody else, and I will not be able to control it. I mean, a human right should be the right to my face, for instance. I mean, if we're going to have facial recognition software, we also need to have a human right where I own my face. I own my fingerprints, I should own my DNA. All these things that I will never be able to replace if somebody steals it and abuses it in some way. We need legislation and rights regarding these parts of who we are. We've never had to have that before because the technology wasn't there, but now the technology is there, and therefore we need to have those rights, and we need to have a legal system that can protect these rights. So we need new institutions, and we always did that with new technologies. We created new institutions, and the challenge right now is that the development is so fast that we need to develop the institutions equally fast, and that's a challenge.
Thank you so much, Lene, for being here today.
Thank you.